For today's story, we're going to go way back in time to 1626. The place, Pond Square in Highgate, London, which at the time was named Pond Square because of its two man-made ponds that were said to be dug out by a hermit in the 14th century. But it was in 1626 that Sir Francis Bacon, the English philosopher and politician, was riding through Pond Square in a horse-drawn carriage, accompanied by his friend, Dr. Winterbourne. And it was a bitterly cold day in early April, and the snow lay thick upon the ground. During the journey, the two men had been discussing if it was possible to preserve food other than using the salting method. Sir Francis Bacon was probably looking down at the brilliant white snow and rubbing his hands together trying to keep himself warm, when all of a sudden he had the crazy idea that maybe food preserved in really cold conditions could stop it from spoiling. Of course, we know now that freezing food is a reliable way of preserving it, but back in those days it was unheard of. And so, to test this theory, Sir Francis Bacon went to a poor woman's house at the bottom of Highgate and purchased a chicken from her. He also asked the woman to slaughter, gut and pluck the unfortunate experimental bird. When the bird was handed over, Sir Francis Bacon wasted no time and went about packing the prepared chicken with snow, and voila! There you have the very first frozen chicken. Unfortunately for Sir Francis Bacon, whilst digging in the freezing cold conditions packing the chicken in the snow, he came down with a severe chill, and he was in no fit state to actually make it back to his own lodgings, and he made his way to Arundel House to see if he could stay the night until he was feeling better. The lord of the house was actually absent, but it was the housekeeper that actually took pity on Sir Francis Bacon and allowed him to stay the night. Unfortunately, the bed he was placed into hadn't been slept in for over a year and was damp, and Sir Francis Bacon's chill quickly turned into pneumonia, and he died on the 9th of April 1626, only days after his experiment. But that wasn't the end of the story. You see, ever since the death of Sir Francis Bacon, there have been many sightings throughout the centuries of a distressed phantom that likes to lurk around the area of Pond Square, absolutely terrifying unlucky passers-by who just so happen to witness with their own eyes the chilling, haunting apparition. But the ghost that haunts Pond Square isn't that of Sir Francis Bacon. Oh no, it's the ghost of the frozen chicken. The pale, vengeful, phantom fowl has been seen on many occasions, mostly during cold weather, roosting on branches of trees or frantically running around in circles whilst flapping what's left of its wings. All the while it can be seen shivering in the cold. Some accounts state that the bird can be heard squawking loudly, whilst others say it is silent. During the Second World War, the ghostly chicken was seen by a passing-by air raid warden who was making his way through Pond Square. For some reason, he was not too concerned as to why the dead plucked chicken was running around, but more concerned with catching the bird for his dinner. The air raid warden gave a good chase, but the ghost chicken was just too fast, and eventually it simply vanished into thin air, leaving the air raid warden mystified. Many have also heard the phantom sounds of a horse and carriage in the dead of night, followed by sightings of a frantic bird running around in hysterics before simply fading out of existence. The ghostly chicken has also surprised a couple who were enjoying a romantic embrace upon a bench under a tree. Unknown to them, perched above their heads was the shivering carcass of the ghostly bird. It dropped down unexpectedly from the tree branch, landing with a plop next to the couple on the bench, scaring them half to death, before it jumped from the bench and proceeded to run around in hysterics whilst flapping its wings madly, and eventually it ran into, or should I say through, the nearest wall. The next appearance of the strange phantom bird came in 1969, as a gentleman whose car had brought down couldn't help but notice the strange plucked chicken squawking and running around in circles, and then vanishing before his very eyes as soon as he approached. This may have been the last sighting of the ghostly chicken. It's not been seen much since the 1970s, but that's not to say that the ghost of the frozen chicken isn't still lingering in the area. Who knows, maybe, just maybe, Pond Square is still haunted by the spooky poltergeist. As always, I'll let you decide. The word poltergeist is German for noisy ghost or noisy spirit, and you normally associate a poltergeist with a haunted house case, like the Enfield poltergeist or the Black Monk of Pontefract. It's the age-old story of a disruptive phantom making its presence known by banging on walls in the still of the night, overturning furniture, and on even rare occasions actual physical harm and manifestation, all the classic traits of a haunted house. But you don't normally hear of a haunted garden shed, or at least I've never come across a haunting of a wooden garden shed full of random tools, gardening equipment and clutter of spare parts. But that is exactly what 72-year-old Stephen McKeers from Severn Beach in the UK believed was happening in his garden shed after he experienced some strange activity. Every day Stephen would leave his shed in the stereotypical unorganised messy way that most men do, organised in absolute chaos. A mess that most men will tell you is organised mess. And the very proud man of that shed will tell you he knows exactly where everything is. So you can imagine the pure confusion Stephen experienced one day when he returned to his shed to find his messy worktop had been organised and tidied up. All these little nuts and bolts and bits and pieces that he left out the previous day on his worktop were all neatly placed away into a tub of bird feed that he kept just to the side. As you can imagine, Stephen thought this was very strange and even began to question his own state of mind. He was worried he was becoming forgetful in his old age. It was only when it was suggested to him that the shed must be haunted by some kind of neat freak ghost that he decided he needed to obtain some visual evidence. And so, with the help of his neighbour, he set up a trail camera, scooped up a handful of nuts and bolts and other random pieces and scattered them all over his work surface. He then locked up and returned to his house for the night. And that night, whilst he slept, the night vision camera caught something amazing. Between the hours of 12 AM and 2:30 AM, in the dead of night, a creature entered the shed without opening the door or making a sound. It was simply just there, and once again, the nuts and bolts and bits and pieces made their way into the box of bird feed, and before the sun came up, the creature had simply vanished. The next day, when the sun came up, Stephen ventured out into his garden and walked down to his shed. He unlocked the door to find that once again, everything had been neatly placed into the birdseed box. He grabbed the camera and went back to his house to review the footage, and what he discovered totally took him by surprise. When the video starts, you can clearly see the random objects on the worktop, and then the creature appeared in the shot. It had big eyes that burned bright in the night vision footage. It had a long, wiry tail and two rounded ears that poked out from its furry head. And it was small. It was very small. It was a tiny mouse. The video showed a very cute, adorable mouse that seemed to be totally obsessed with tidying up the messy worktop, picking up bits and pieces in its very small paws and placing them very carefully into the tub of bird feed. And he did this for nearly 2 hours. He even tried picking up objects that were almost twice his size, and when he had finished clearing Stephen's mess, he simply disappeared out of the shot and vanished into the night, as quiet as a mouse. So if you ever suspect that your home may be haunted by a very tidy poltergeist, remember, even the most strange examples of unexplained activity isn't always paranormal, and you might just have a mouse in your house.